Hi, it's Leanne Grove coming to you with The Ambitious Woman. Welcome back, everyone, and thank you for being here to interview yet another amazing woman and find out her secret strategies and techniques to being able to thrive and prosper. So that being said, I want to welcome Kim Keller here with us today. Hi, Kim.
Hi, good to be here.
Awesome. So Kim is a tantrika, intimacy coach, and sex educator from Ashland, Oregon. She has over 30 years experience as a counselor and coach and specializes in working with women, men, and couples to bring back the pleasure, joy, and intimacy into their sexuality. She also specializes in utilizing your juice energy to inspire and enliven your everyday life. So I'm really excited to be able to have a conversation with her today and talk about a topic that's not often talked about in an open forum and find out how that can inspire our lives. So Kim, you get the juiciest subjects.
I do get the juiciest subjects. I'm thankful every day for the work I get to do because I get to really drop into some lovely, juicy, and what's really sometimes super hard to talk about and can really be challenging to talk about. And more often than not, it's the challenge that is what brings people to me. And then we find out it's not such a scary thing, and we can create sacred space for being able to have really important conversations, not only about our sexuality, but how our sexuality and our intimacy affects the rest of our lives.
That's awesome. So maybe you could take a couple of minutes to start with and just tell the audience about your journey to where you are today.
Yeah, sure. Because it's a strange one. I've really come a long way to be where I am now, working in the field that I'm working in. I was married for 23 years, had 2 kids, living in Southern California. Was the director of a youth development project and working what we called the Western states, so up and down the West Coast of the U.S., and working with school districts and communities, law enforcement, counseling organizations. I was a drug alcohol counselor, but what I mostly worked with was communities and building community building and working in drug and violence prevention. And so I was a career woman, ran my own business, and navigated and trained and worked with high school through college age students for 20 years up and down the coast. And that also took me to larger travel around with that group also. And raising my own 2 kids. And so really living that super fast paced, always trying to figure out how to navigate work and career and kids and husband and family and all of that all at the same time. And so that was the first part of my life. And then when I moved to Oregon and came here to Ashland, things really shifted when I suddenly found myself single after all that time, and the kids were now freshly out of the house, and it was really time for me to figure out who I really wanted to be, what was really important to me, what mattered the most, where did I really want to take my life. And part of what I knew was I didn't want to go back to the pace that I had been living in Southern California. And I didn't want to go back to the amount of stress and anxiety and so much to try and navigate and so much to try and keep running, and that I knew there was this whole other part of me that I hadn't really discovered. And it's just so surprising to me that I didn't catch on sooner. But I was raised in this really very fundamental home, Christian home, where you didn't talk about sex, you waited until you were married. It was one way or the highway, and it was very in the closet, and kind of it had a lot of cultural overlay with it. A lot of that shame or things we never talked about. Never talked about things like bleeding or talk about things like intercourse or ejaculation or any of those kinds of words. And so all of that got really shoved under the carpet. And then when I came to Ashland, a very dear friend of mine said, let's go to this Tantra weekend and see what it's about. And I didn't know what Tantra was. I'd never heard the word. I didn't know what it meant. And she dragged me to this weekend. And I have to really say, quite genuinely, when I came out of that weekend, the whole world was different. And I knew that there was a really elemental piece of myself that I had not previously discovered or lived into, and that now there was something I knew I really needed to explore for myself and see how that, I didn't know then that it would change the way in which I interact with my world, my career, my livelihood, all of it. But it revealed itself pretty quickly that there was a part of my inspiration and my creativity that had not been freed up until I really discovered Tantra. And Tantra means to weave. It's a big word and it's a big philosophy. I can talk more about that. But when I discovered there was more for that, then I've spent now the last 14 years on my own journey of discovery. And then took all those years of counseling that I had done with high school kids and college students and families and brought it to the field of sacred sexuality, and now work with men, women, and couples.
Wow, that's a great story.
Yeah, that's the brief version. So yeah, thanks for letting me share that little piece. So that's who I am, and that's how I got to here, which I'm talking to you from what I call my temple space.
Yeah.
And this is where I work with my clients.
Oh, wow. So we get to be in your temple space today.
You do.
That's awesome. So, I mean, when we had a chat the other day, you talked about that there's some benefits in keeping your sexuality and your sensuality alive, well beyond just obviously the pleasure of what that can arise. So can you tell our viewers a little bit more about that?
Yeah, sure. Well, it's really no accident that we have the kind of pleasure system built in our body that we have, not just the sexual pleasure, but pleasure in general, pleasure of how we eat, the touch of the skin, that pleasure in all of those things, the senses are really elemental to our overall health and wellness, that it's really what keeps our body functioning, and it keeps chemicals flowing, and it keeps things moving. And so the way in which we take care of our bodies, most of us have some kind of, we know that we should be exercising, and we know that we need to eat well, and so we look at these different areas. We need a certain amount of sunlight to really be healthy, and so we look at all those areas to make sure that we're taking good care of our body. And what we don't realize is that there is a huge amount of health and wellness that comes from keeping our sensual sexual self alive. And it has to do with our hormones, our hormone production. It has to do with other chemicals in the brain, the oxytocin, that keeps our bodies actually lubricated and moist. And so that we know that as we age and we get drier and drier, and you can really start to feel that in your body. You can feel it in the stiffness of the joints and the dryness of the hair and the wrinkles, right? And so what happens in that is when we're younger, we have the hormonal push of procreation, which is an interesting support, right? Our bodies want to procreate. So we have this hormonal push that keeps us more active that way because we're driven by it. And then as we age and that drive starts to change, it's a lot of people, I work with people all the time who think, oh, well, now I don't have to worry about that. It's sort of this disposable experience and I can kind of let that go. Only that's a really huge mistake, because as we let that go, we actually let things dry up. And it not only produces so much for our body physically, but that's also for women. This is really important for women. Our sexuality is our creative center. So here's one of the things that's happened to us as we've become more and more multi-talented in our world, right? And those of us in the developed world, we really get to be career women and mamas and wives, and we have this whole palette in front of us. But a lot of the time, what we're asked to do is we're asked to really come all from our brain and really be intellectual about all of our choices and our interactions and how we move through the professional world. And what happens is we end up diminishing or not paying attention to what is actually our feminine creative center. Like the center of our creative force as a woman is our whole genital reproductive system. In Tantra, I want to share, there's a word that we use, it's called yoni. Mm-hmm. And yoni is the Sanskrit word for all of our reproductive system, everything from labia to cervix to womb to ovaries. The whole of it is called yoni. And what yoni means, it translates to, is sacred space. That this is the heart of our sacred center. This is our life force. We have the ability to mythically and magically take a soul and turn it into a human being. And whether we do that or not is irrelevant to the amount of power that is held in that part of our body and that part of our being. And so much of our creative life force actually comes from there. But we've gotten really separate from that in our culture. Mm. And we really spend a lot of time thinking from the waist up. And we forget that there's a really important element for us as women that is from the waist down.
Yeah, wow. Yeah, and so what I hear is that, because I guess it's easy to think of it in isolation. It's just about, having sex and having pleasure there. But like you're now connecting that through to our creativity and our beingness. So if someone is disconnected from that, how do they go about reconnecting? Because like it sounds like an amazing amount of power and energy to bring into what is already, for most people, a great life.
Yeah. Well, and I loved when I got invited to be on this particular summit because of its title, Ambitious Women. And that being an ambitious woman myself, there's a couple of things that happens is that my ambition can override my pleasure. And I get so caught up in what it is I need to do and produce and make happen because I have all this ambition to create the thing. And I end up diminishing and separating from my pleasure. And that's not what makes life juicy. When we get all done and we're all, used up and ready to pass on, I don't want to be thinking that it was my ambition that led my way, but it was really that I led a pleasurable and desire-filled life. So you asked, how do we do that? So I work with men, women, and couples in this because it starts out as an individual project. Like first, I have to learn my own body and I have to learn my own system. I have to learn what it is that I like and what it is that I don't like. Where are my turn-ons? Where are my turn-offs? Where are my hang-ups? There's a whole lot to arousal and pleasure. Oftentimes people come to me and they want to like, how do I figure out how to orgasm or how do I get more pleasure? And they want me to teach them where the buttons are. Like, here's the button that you push and you do this thing and you do, and then, then you do it. Whereas actually it's
sounds really like an ambitious woman. Like, just give me the instructions, add it to my to-do list, and I'll have another thing that I can to do.
Right. Tell me how it works and I'll do it and we'll check it off the list. But it's so much bigger than that because it's not only the landscape of our bodies, which is incredibly, yonis or vaginas are like snowflakes. No two are alike. And so how one works is not how another works. And so we don't have a preset how it works. What we do have is we do have a landscape map, and I teach that map. In fact, I teach that map using my yoni pillow. This is my vulva pillow that has
gold.
It is gold because that's how it is. So precious. It's golden. And so there's the part of learning this landscape and how it works and how all the intricate parts work inside, but they're really unique. One woman's is long and narrow, and another woman's is short and round, and another woman's is deep inside, and another woman's is very revealed. So they're very, very different. So there's the landscape, learning that part, but that's only one element, and it's actually the easier element. Because what it ties into is it ties into the mind and the brain, and how they say that the biggest sex organ we have is our brain. How we feel about sex, how we think about sex, whether it's got shame or guilt or grief or trauma or abuse. If we've had, if our precious parts have been abused, we have a whole other set of things that block us from our pleasure because we have some of that trauma. And in fact, there's a book called Vagina, A New Biography by Naomi Wolf that I always highly recommend to women, because it really talks about how we have even learned to use the damage or the destruction of vaginas as an actual tool of war. Like, that's how we can get women to be quiet. It's how we can get them to shut up. It's how we can get them to be very controllable. Is as soon as we damage or injure their sacred parts, that precious, precious yoni, then she loses her spark of life. Mm-hmm. She loses her vim and vigor. She loses her ambition. And she becomes easy to control. She becomes docile, and she becomes dormant. So as we, in our cultures, become more and more ambitious and more empowered, part of that is going to be the empowerment of our sacred sexuality. So the part of the brain that perhaps is holding that trauma, shame, guilt, or whatever that might be, there's a piece where we work on that so that we can get through that and create a new understanding. And then there is the energy. Our bodies are energy systems, right? We have energy. We've got 4,000 energy meridians that run through our body. And if you're someone who does yoga, Tantra and yoga are related. They're from the same philosophical. Tantra actually was the bigger philosophy, and yoga came from that. But that idea that we have all of these energy systems that run through our body, which used to be more of a theory, and now the science is really shaking out to really show that there is this electrical system in us. And so learning...
Science catches up eventually, doesn't it?
It does. Learning our system, learning that electric system, and connecting those three things together. So it's really a body-mind energy or a body-mind spirit practice to be able to find our fullest pleasure and really use it in our most creative, juicy kinds of ways.
Wow, that's great. Like, hey, yeah. You've stunned me.
I try and take a pause so I don't just ramble and talk all the way through, and give you a moment to digest that part of having that pleasure system.
But because that says to me is, there's a whole lot more power, excitement, potency that can be had in life by embracing that energy, which as a woman is already part of you. And and we all access and utilize to different degrees, I guess. But even just in the awareness that that it's much more than just about sex, that it's about your whole being, and almost like what I'm interpreting is your drive as a woman to be this amazing creature that you are.
Yeah. So one of the other places I want to speak to is for women who, for one reason or another, have lost some of their parts, right? They've had to have surgical removals, or they've had different things that have stopped working, or whatever that might be. And that what I want to say about that is that the energy of those parts remain in our feminine body. And so whether you have the actual parts or not, or you're bleeding, or you're no longer bleeding, or whatever stage or place all of that is in, the energy of it remains. And one of the other things that we know also when it comes to comes to our overall wellness is when we have areas in our body where energy gets stuck, where it gets blocked, that it ultimately creates illness. Yeah. And we know that in so many different ways. Even when you talk about different breast cancers, it's often stuck energy that started in the breasts and then created an illness, right? And so it's the same way if we are stuck in that life force center, if we are stuck in that yoni area, then things get clogged, and then that's where illness comes, and it's where things stop working as well. So I also work with a lot of women who actually come to me because they're having different kinds of problems in their in their sexuality or their sexual issues. So I have women who've come with vulvodynia, or I've had women who've come with incontinence, or their vagina's super dry and sex is painful. And so there's also those things that are starting to go wrong for women, and then they come and we end up helping them get right. And when that gets right, I watch woman after woman after woman walk out of here way more alive and inspired and vibrant than they were when they were having the problems they were. And I've watched many women heal different kinds of problems that they've had through the different kinds of practices that Tantra offers, and that we as practitioners have to be able to share with our people.
Mm. So are there some simple things that women can do at home to help enhance that energy flow and stuckness?
Yeah. So one of my favorite practices is called Jade Egg. And Jade Egg, I brought one here to show it to you even. This is a Jade Egg. It's an actual stone this one has been hand carved for me, that has a string, has a hole in it where you get to we use dental floss, so it has a string. And you use this inside of your vaginal canal as a tool for healing. And it does a variety of things. It works on the exercising and the strengthening of the muscles of the vagina. We've all heard about Kegels and what Kegels can do. This is like a Kegel upgrade.
I've never heard of a Kegel.
Start to learn how to use the stone. A Kegel is when you take your whole vaginal canal and you tighten it and you release it, and you tighten it and you release it. It's exercise.
We call them pelvic floor exercises in Australia.
Yeah, pelvic floor exercises, right.
Okay.
Yes. And so using the stone for the pelvic floor exercises, and what happens is as we strengthen the vaginal canal and as we articulate and learn to use the muscles, we have muscle bands that are in there, and we learn to articulate and use them in a way that we can move the egg up and down, independent of anything else, but I'm just using my muscles, that as we do that, we strengthen, and that's where it helps with incontinence, and it helps with, it creates a stimulation in the pelvic floor, which helps increase hormone movement. It's a whole lot of physical benefits to it. And then on top of that, it also works with the energy of inside of the vagina. It does pressure point work. It actually massages and works and helps remove some of the things. Vaginas are very absorbent, right? They're super absorbent. And so that's one of the reasons that it's actually, STDs or, sexually transmitted diseases or infections, because it's actually absorbent. It's also energetically absorbent. And so when it takes things in, which is what vaginas do, it takes in the energy of whatever that is that's coming in. And so some of us who've had experience with trauma or lovers that weren't good for us, or mistreatment of yoni, or even our own neglect of our yoni, that it can get really clogged and stuck. And so learning to use the egg helps to remove that, helps to repattern some of the old stories that we have around guilt and shame around vagina, and really helps us bring all of those three things that I was talking about, mind, body, and spirit, helps us bring those together in a way so that we become more and more connected to her. So that's one of the ways that we do that as an individual practice. It's just my practice. And then we move into, and that's where when I work with men, women, and couples, there's other things, there's practices you can do with partners. I also want to speak to, all partners, doesn't matter what our sexual preference is or what our sexual, how we represent or whatever that might be. We all have pleasure systems. Yeah. And so that's where I said earlier that we all have an erotic signature, right? So we all have a signature that looks slightly different. I would write Kim one way and you'd write it another, but it's all unique to each of us. And so each of us, regardless of our sexual preference or presentation or choice, have an erotic signature. So learning that erotic signature is super, super important.
Wow. That's cool.
I've done it again. You're speechless again.
I know. Yeah, no, and I guess, and that's coming from a place where in some ways it's new information. In some ways it's not. It's like intuitively, I know what you're saying is true. I kind of feel that in my body, but it's like it's that aspect of ourselves as a woman just doesn't get talked about and doesn't, and doesn't get any attention.
Yeah. And it's something too that comes up with the egg that I really appreciate, because I travel and teach it quite a bit. So sometimes
you don't share the egg, do you?
No, everybody gets their own. There's no sharing of eggs. But when I travel and teach it, I do one-day workshops, and then I do other bigger workshops. But I travel. I have a one-day workshop I take on the road, and so I work with women from lots of different walks of life, different choices, and have heard numerous times like really powerful CEOs that before they go into that board meeting, before they walk in there and they're going to really do what needs to be done, they use their egg to get themselves centered, to get themselves focused, to get themselves really in their own power, not in that out there power, and to give them an access to the feminine wisdom that flows through them. Like, let her make some of these choices and move out of our heads so much. We're in our heads so much that we forget that we have a whole guidance system. Like, our internal women are known to be emotional, and we're known to be very intuitive. And those are really powerful things that we can ignore and miss a whole piece of a guidance system and a design that's made that way on purpose when we put our feminine all the way aside. Instead of bringing that in, we all carry feminine and masculine in us. But feminine really needs to be given this opportunity to take the lead in a whole lot of these ways. So I use my egg. I have my egg in right now because I knew I wanted to come onto this call, and I wanted to be able to really be articulate and clear and straight up talk to you from the divine feminine. So I've been wearing her all day.
Just love that. And and I love how you put that into the context of a busy woman. It's like, well, actually, it being your power center, and I mean, I hear you having spent a lot of time in corporate myself, and it's so easy to run from your masculine and the thinking and the doing and that. And I know over my own journey, as I've brought out more and more of my feminine, which is about to explode when I get my egg, is that there's so many gifts that the feminine offers that the masculine doesn't, in terms of bringing an organization together. And I think that, this world, the more women embrace that energy and that power and bring it in, and we then get a holistic view where we've got a balance of the masculine and feminine energies, and it's not people, it's energies, that, we're going to have much more healthy organizations and healthy workforces where people feel enriched rather than worn out.
Yes, that is so, I'm so glad you just said that. To feel enriched instead of worn out. To use our pleasure. That's what the pleasure really is for. It's why we all know we need to have vacations and days off, right? Is that if you don't take that self-care time, then you're going to end up really worn out. Let me ramp that up one more step. If we let our sensual pleasure in our body fade and become unimportant, we end up exhausted and worn out because we have not replenished. We've only depleted. So these practices, whether it be Jade Egg, whether it be the practices that you can do with partners, those, whatever that might be, if you're doing it yourself or you're doing it with someone, either way, those are replenishing, enlivening, activating practices. And so they become, I put my sacred sexuality practice on equal ground with my exercise practice and with my eating health practice. my sacred sexuality practice is on even ground as far as importance to my overall wellness. And that too is supported by science these days, that it really is that important to our vitality.
Wow. That's awesome. So we're coming to the end. Is there anything else that you wanted to share with the viewers today that you haven't yet shared?
Well, I think the thing I want to just kind of wrap up with is whether the egg speaks to you or some other kind of sensual practice speaks to you, and there's lots of other ways that you can go, and there's books and workshops and retreats and wherever. I know women are watching this from all over, and there's lots of different experiences like that. Whichever one most speaks to you, what I want to say is that it's a practice. You can't give away what you don't have.
Yeah.
And if you are dried up and disconnected from your juicy, sensual, alive, vibrant self, then it becomes really absolutely impossible to go out and be alive, vibrant, and juicy in the world. And so whether you're someone who's wanting to attract a partner, if you're someone who wants to keep your partnership alive and vibrant, or if you're somebody who wants to be single and just wants to live this alive, vibrant life, you can't give away what you don't have. And the only way to get it is through practice. And that it is a practice and it's like learning to play an instrument. It takes time. You never get done learning how to play an instrument. You never get finished learning how to be the musician of the century. And so what a lovely practice. I always am so thrilled to send my clients home with some of the juiciest, most fabulous homework. And you have to go home and do this practice. And what a lovely way to have to be healthy. So I just encourage you, whatever you choose, is to choose health and wellness and vitality.
That's beautiful. And you also have a free gift for our audience as well.
I do. I have a free gift. So I have two things to offer on my website. The first one is a paper I've written called 3 Secrets to Sensational Sex. And it really talks about some of these things and how to come together and how to really increase and up level your sexual interaction. There's some real simple first practices to be able to do. And also that for anyone who's looking to, sex is a sensitive subject. And I know it's hard to find people that you can just talk blatantly about it with and talk about the ups and the downs and the awfuls and the wonderfuls and where it's been horrible and where it's been fabulous. And so I offer a breakthrough call, and the breakthrough call is designed specifically for you, whoever that is, to really be able to talk about what I like to do is help you walk through what's your sexy life look like, where are you at, and what might you be able to do to get from one to the other. And I have lots of different kinds of resources and places to help you find what you're looking for, regardless of where you are. And so that call, the free breakthrough call, is also on my website. And you go on and schedule a call, and then I call you in 45 minutes to see what's going on with your internal sensual life and how can I support you in finding your juiciest self.
Oh, that's great.
So should I say what my website is?
Yeah, look,
should I say my website? There
will be a button, but say your website for anyone that's listening.
Great. So it's KimRoseKeller.com. So that's my full name, Kim Rose Keller, Keller, just like it sounds, .com. And there's a plethora of videos. There's a blog that's always giving little tidbits about living a juicy life. And I would love to share that and help the whole world be juicy. I say healing the world a yoni at a time.
I like that. Thank you so much for being here today, Kim. I've got so much out of and I'm already excited about some of my future juicy practices.
Great. Well, it's been a joy to be here with you. Thank you so much.
And thank you, viewers, for being in here and tuning in, and stay tuned for another interview with yet another amazing woman to come your way. Much love.
I can't wait. Bye-bye.